This video is from the 2020 August trip, a 10-day trip where James Blackwell, Mark Helm, Mark Rendall, and Mike Eason and I went up to Idaho, up through the Eastern Sierras, up Highway 395 on a 2-day ride up, and then did a lot of riding in the state of Idaho and Montana. Stopped in the June Lake area here. My bike was having some issues and had issues all through the trip and did some repairs there. This is Mike and James and I. And the other guys came from Seattle area. Mark Rendell came from Phoenix. Mark Helm came from Seattle. So we got back off to 395, and there's Mono Lake, and there's Topaz Lake. Topaz just south of Reno and Carson City. And this is where we stayed the first night. This is Virginia City, Nevada. My bike actually stalled here as part of that problem. This is an old silver mining town where the Comstock mine was discovered in the late 1870s. And you see the old cemetery there, James with a dog that stopped in the camp, and an old Trump advertising car that was going through town. Next day, up through the Oregon Jordan Valley, and then a lot of cool agricultural areas, and then into Cambridge, Idaho, where this hotel was, where we met the other two guys. We did some surgery on my fuel pump at that hotel. Next day, I went up along the Snake River, and this is the Brownlee Dam and our first day of riding together. I'll show the map each time. That yellow line is our trail up the Snake, and then up through the mountains above the Snake River on the Idaho side. This is all old mining areas. There's the Brownlee Dam along the Snake River, and we're going downstream here along the road up to the Hills Canyon Dam, which we actually rode across here. Really cool. We rode up this way and then went up on top of the ridge overlooking the gorge. So at this point is where all the jet boats launch downstream of this dam, and there's a lot of tour that go off this area, a lot of rafters. So this is low water season. You can see the river looks pretty full, but it's really not. There's an old discharge tunnel from the diversion tunnel built when the dam was created. You can imagine the flow through that thing. So just a really nice drive. That visitor center was closed because of COVID, so we never saw a car on this road. Just a nice ride. On the way back to dirt riding, we saw some turkeys here, and then started going off-road as we went up the Kleinschmidt grade, an old mining trail here. We, from this point forward, rode dirt back to the first night for camping together. You'll see the other guys coming up behind me there with headlights, and apologize for the bug smudge on my glass there for half this day. This is Kuprin on the middle of nowhere, a little tiny village up on the top of that ridge. And then I had done some poor planning here and picked a ATV trail that was pretty gnarly, overgrown. It got worse and worse. It was only a couple miles in this section, so we knew we were getting out of it eventually, but as you can see, it got pretty overgrown. So the goal here was to try to stand up, but it was so overgrown I certainly couldn't do that with my height. So we got through that with some difficulty and made it back up on top of the ridge to Sheeprock, which is actually up above that dam we just stopped at. You can see the bikes here, and I actually, several of us stood up on the Old Man of the Rock sign there, because we're sort of old men at this point, I guess. And then back to some dirt, and then back heading down towards McCall area, McCall, Idaho, for camping that evening. We came out by Lost Valley Reservoir here, and then ended up finding a camping place here. Really nice little place just outside of McCall with a shelter. I did help pick Mike's bike up there in the mud. And next morning I had to stop for a sleeping bag from Mark Helm, who had mice in his sleeping bag. So that was quite a surprise. He threw out the bag. There's McCall and the lake. A little landslide that had happened here on the way up to Riggins. And then we had to leave James. He had a bad rear tire, so he had to go to Grangeville, get a tire. And then our plan was to meet up with him after this dirt ride. So this is the Salmon River, and then climbing up into the mountains towards Florence. And then we had a bit of a problem, as you can see on this pink line all over the place. Mark Helm took a turn unbeknownst to the rest of us and got himself separated from the group. So we fanned out, had a search pattern, and could not find him. So our plan, after searching for a few hours,
I'm looking for a guy we've lost.
I saw this guy and asked a few other motorists, but nobody had seen him, and so we just continued down the mountain after several hours of riding. and ended up could not find him. And turns out he was down in Grangeville as we failed to see him up on the mountain. Everything was good, but on the way down here on this road, I got a flat tire. You see, we got into a clearing, had some rain, but had a nice stump to change it on. And next morning, I had to have to change it again. This is my Garmin that fell down inside the chain, damaged it, and then ended up spending the night in Kemia, up north of the Kuski there. There's two small villages along the rivers. So ended up having to change the tire again the next morning because I did a bad job repairing the flat, but I put a new tube in it and all was good. Once we all met up, we were putting about 250 miles on every day, and about 100 to 125 of that was on dirt. See a little turkey here on that log. As James and I came up. This is a big logging area,
Wow.
and saw quite a bit of this. Climbing up to the top of this mountain, and our plan was then to go on this road called the Lolo Motorway. You can see this road is maintained. Idaho does a really nice job with gravel to help with traction. Here's the Lolo Motorway. This is the old Lewis and Clark Trail. It's about 100 miles of dirt stretching from the Montana wilderness into Idaho's panhandle. So just a fantastic road. Single lane, didn't see any other traffic up here, just a couple motorcycles, and just a beautiful ride through the forests. And they've had some wildfires up here, but you see all these purple flowers and weeds tend to grow after the fires. And a really nice camping site here with this, I think it's called Ridge Campground, this beautiful alpine lake. We're up at about, I don't know, 7,000 feet. There's Mark Helm coming up on his Africa Twin. It was fairly rocky, as you can see here, and we saw some other bikers. A little bit of rain here, as you can see on my camera lens. Just beautiful vistas. Now, this is pretty hazy because of all the wildfires burning in California and Oregon, and but still really nice. A lot of vegetation, just pretty colors up here, and trails were quite passable. Then we came to an old lookout. This is a fairly steep hill climb. This looks not quite so bad in the video, but this is stand up, commit, and make the climb. This is very rocky, and there's James getting out of my way.
Hell yeah.
And this is an old tower that was built in the 1930s, I think. You can actually rent this place out as a campsite. Really cool. Way up on top of a rocky peak here, as you can see. So you can rent this out. You can see some cots in here. There's propane stove, and that'd be kind of cool. So we came down the hill and had some cold pizza. You can see some of the guys eating that from the night before. It's kind of a nice snack on the trail. And here's James in front of me on his KTM. Followed him down and got back on the main trail. I did the navigation and set these tracks up ahead of time
That way. Which
to
way you
load
going?
them from Google Maps primarily, and making the routes and put them in my Garmin and put a bunch of waypoints and then exported those so I could share them with the guys and put them on my phone for backup. So that worked out pretty well. That was Mark Rendall in front of me on his 1200 GS, a fairly heavy bike. There's a deer there. Fairly heavy bike for throwing around these mountain trails. He does a great job of that thing. It's quite a handful. Another beautiful lake. It's a place called the Indian Post Office there. Group shot. This is an old spot along this Lewis and Clark Trail. This road was built, I've read, in the 1930s. It was built up. Of course, it was used by the Lewis and Clark expedition back in the 1800s, but was actually turned into a maintained or semi-maintained trail by the Conservation Corps in the 1930s.
Incredible.
Just absolutely stunning scenery up here. You can see these vistas looking out. Really beautiful.
Wow.
We camped about half the nights, and some nights like this evening, we had a Airbnb in Hamilton, Montana, and worked out pretty well to kind of mix it up. That Airbnb had a laundry, so we had that planned mid-trip. And I mentioned the navigation. That was I used the app on my phone called My Trails. This is a place called Loxa Lodge, a place that Mark had been to before. And then a little bit later on down the road, we stopped at this place for dinner near Missoula, Montana. So here's the Airbnb. We got to park our bikes in the garage. And the next day on the Purple Line, went from Hamilton through that Purple Line over to Elk City. So after breakfast in town, we made our way towards the Magruder Corridor, which is a huge block of land on the Panhandle. It goes back to the west, and we're approaching the dirt section. It was another 100+ miles of dirt over some passes here, and you can see a little fawn jump out in front of me. You have to be careful. There's deer all over the place. Mark saw a bear. I saw a badger. Did not have camera on. That was quite interesting. Badger jumped out in front of me. Just a really beautiful day here. Rivers all over the place in Idaho. Just fantastic scenery, and always nice to have a stream by trail. Here's Mark Rendall in front of me again. So this is a similar type of road, another bridge that was built in the 30s over this stream. And James had some issues with his skid plate. He had a bolt that broke, and I ended up having a bracket that broke on mine. I didn't even know it. Came upon some guys here riding the other way. So it's always good to stop and chat and see what's going on.
8,000 feet.
Crossed over the 8,000 foot elevation level. This is about the maximum we got to in these mountains. These trails are only open a few months of the year. They get snow up here for most of the year, so this is just a small window. I let James go first and then Mark so I could chase them down this hill. You can see the heavier 1200 GS around these corners and a little
All
bit of the
right.
softer dirt, but had fun chasing these guys down.
Woo.
A little muddy here. So really nice day. We stopped for snacks, as I said. Back to the tool question. We all carry some tools on our bikes. I've got tools that can basically deal with any fastener on the bike. We got front and rear tubes. We got air pump. We've got nuts and bolts, basic stuff to fix most anything that can break. And we end up using most of those tools on a trip like this for somebody's bike. And you see Mark getting a little squirrely there on the soft stuff,
Nice.
but always fun to there you go. Let's chase each other through the trails. The biggest risk is flat tires on a trip like this. I got a pinch flat on mine where the pressure was too low and damaged the tube, so I inflated it to a higher pressure after that. But Mike had quite a surprise, a full blowout. You can see that picture on his Africa Twin rear tire. He didn't show up at the stop, and
Damn it.
I went back to find him,
Yeah.
and then it actually failed again. He rode over a nail. You can see in the back tire. The right picture is the guy ends up owning the Mosca uh, baggage and clothing company. Showed up on his KTM, so we got a little product demo there at the tire change location. So ended up using a lot of spare tubes, and next morning we actually stopped and picked up some replenishment supplies. Had a really nice camp out here just west of Elk City. This ended up being a really nice campsite, and next morning for the map, on the green line on that map, we're going to head down to goal getting to Yellow Pine, Idaho. So I had to stop at this place to pick up some tubes. It's the same place that James had bought his tire earlier. Turned out to be Ricky Carmichael, dirt bike rider's mechanic. It's kind of neat shop. The problem was that this flat tire sequence ended up adding about 70 miles to this day's ride, so I miscalculated and ended up being quite a long ride. Here back along the Salmon River, you see just how gorgeous this was. We'd seen rafters um, on this river and nearby rivers all throughout the trip. Just a beautiful canyon. And we ended up going a little farther in on the Salmon and then up and over the mountain range to some dirt here and saw this cool bridge. So we stopped here for a little snack. This had been built recently to replace a very sketchy wooden bridge. So our next move here was to continue up this road and up the French switchbacks, French Creek switchbacks here. And you can see those here in the landscape off in the distance. Just beautiful. I actually dropped my side bag. I didn't have it latched properly on this trail. You can see the guys hammering through this mud puddle. Some of those can be quite deep, and you got to be a little cautious. There's an old school bus on this trail. It's kind of neat. We got our pictures in it. It's kind of a stopping point on the BDR trail. BDR is Backroads Discovery Route. A lot of these trails end up being on that route. I took the guys up to a little lunch spot on this saddle overlooking both sides at over 8,000 feet. Had a little snack up there, and then pretty much in the middle of nowhere on both sides. So just fantastic. Coming down, you can hear Mike's horn honking as he turned the handlebars to the left. His horn switch hit the tank bag, so that was a common butt of jokes throughout the trip. But Mark Rendall in front of me here. We carried all of our camping gear, camping chair, clothes, food, water, extra gas, a lot of stuff on the bikes. You can see me using my phone there as backup GPS. And then ended up staying or stopping in this little bar in Sakesh, I think it's called. Had a nice cold beer and stapled our dollar bill with all of our signatures to the ceiling. Probably should not have taken the extra hour because there's an old airstrip here. I was miscalculating that extra 70 miles, but it was still beautiful. I tried a new series of tires, similar brand as my son Jordan rides, the Motaz Tractionator series. There's James up on that switchback. I tried a tire called the Tractionator Adventure, which was absolutely fantastic. Great grip, and I'm going to stick with that. So it's always a bit of a experiment to see which tire works best in the kind of terrain. Here we are above 8,600 feet again, coming back over the pass, heading down towards Yellow Pine. That's James in front of me. And, we did some chasing down this hill. But tires are one of the most important things for grip and just stability. So I've been really happy with those front and rear. Here's Yellow Pine. Ended up having dinner in that little corner lodge, and then off to camp here this nearby Yellow Pine, and we came back to town the next morning. Our goal was to get back down south to Loman, and then that's where we would break up and split up for the rest of the trip. Took a lot of abuse from my prior days mismanagement of distance, but this day worked out pretty well. There's a big helicopter with a fire bucket under it. There's forest fires nearby on these last couple of days, but we never really had a threat of one, and these trails remained open, so that was good. Went past Deadwood Reservoir there off in the distance. There's a deer there on the corner to the left,
It's up
and
around the corner.
you're heading back down the grade towards Loman, where we would say farewell to both Marks. Mark Rendell would head down towards Arizona, and Mark Helm would end up going back to Seattle. Mike, James, and I would take that red line over to Burns, Oregon. Stayed in this little cabin that night and put us in a good position to take Highway 395 here south all the way down through the Sierras to Los Angeles. You see these alkali lakes, Lake Ebert and Goose Lake, and then we ended up having bike troubles. Both James and my bike were having fuel issues. There's a big dust devil, a really spectacular one just north of Reno. So we stopped at the KTM dealer in Reno to look at James's bike. Mike taking a nap there, and then Mike and I continued in the evening with a wildfire burning down that hill, and we camped just south of Mammoth Lakes. James had gone straight through from Reno, so just the two of us came back down. You can see the haze from the smoke there near Mammoth, but just a fantastic 10-day trip with 6 days of dirt riding in Idaho.